Good evening and welcome to today's session on BIC Streams in collaboration with the Indian Music Experience Museum. The world of music instruments, the science, the stories, and the stars. Joining us for today's session are Suma Sudhindra, Mansi Prasad, Sahana Mohan, and Kritika Srinivasan, all of whom are part of the Indian Music Experience Museum. Before I hand over to Mansi, a few quick instructions. If you want, uh, do follow us on our social media channels for updates from us, or you can sign up to our mailing list. We will be posting the bios of today's panelists at the bottom on the chat box that you see at the bottom of your screen. Next to the chat box is the Q&A box. Do post your questions for today's panelists via the Q&A box. With that, welcome everyone, and over to you, Mansi.
Thank you, Raghu. And good evening to everyone who's joined us. And welcome to this evening's webinar or illustrated talk on musical instruments, the science, the stories, and the stars. This webinar is brought to you by the curatorial team at the Indian Music Experience Museum, which is India's first and only interactive music museum. The museum is located in JP Nagar in Bangalore. And for those of you who haven't as yet visited, please do visit. The museum is now reopened from Fridays to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you'll find more on our website. And presenting the webinar this evening are myself, Manasi Prasad, I'm the museum director. And then we have Kritika. We'll then have Dr. Suma Sudhindra and finally end with Sahana. So without further ado, let me begin the presentation. And before we start, I also just wanted to say thanks once again to BIC for having invited us here to deliver this talk. So I will begin with speaking a little bit about the science of sound and musical instruments. So first, let's watch a little clip from the film Nadam, which is on display at the IME.
Many centuries ago, music was created with just 2 or 3 notes. It came from a deep longing to connect with the world and beyond. We still hear these notes in the music of different faiths. As civilization grew, so did our music and its range of colors. Our voice was probably the first instrument of music. In time, we found clever ways to make new sounds inspired by nature.
Human beings, like birds, are a musical species. We use sound not only for communication, but in the pursuit of beauty as an end in itself. Human beings first made music using our own bodies, our voices, snapping fingers, clapping, etc. As we evolved, our desire to create beautiful sound, along with our tool-making capabilities because of our opposable thumbs, allowed us to produce music from outside our bodies through the creation of musical instruments. Early musical instruments were probably created from found objects, stones, sticks, shells, animal hide, animal bones, and other natural materials. As time progressed, musical instruments were created in civilizations around the world, which were progressively more intricate in craftsmanship. Today, there are thousands of musical instruments around the world, and the family of musical instruments represents the best of human endeavor. Objects which are beautiful both for their form and their function. That is, they are beautiful both because of how they look as well as the sound that they produce. But first, before music is art, music is sound. It is the production and manipulation of sound that results in music. For sound to be produced, what is essential is vibration. Sound is created through the vibration of the source object, which then causes the air to vibrate, which finally reaches our ear, causing the eardrum to vibrate, which is picked up by auditory nerves, resulting in the sensation of sound. Musical instruments are classified based on how the sound is produced, that is, the location of the vibration. This form of classification leads to four main categories. The first is chordophones, where the vibration is of a stretched string, either by plucking on it or by bowing. The second category is called membranophones, where it is a stretched membrane over a hollow body that vibrates, either by beating it with a stick or the hand or any sort of beater. The third category is what is known as aerophones, where it is a column of air inside a hollow that vibrates. And the fourth category is what is known as idiophones, where a solid material such as stone, wood, or metal vibrates. Now, there is also a fifth category called electrophones, where sound is produced through electronics, like the instrument that you see on your left called a theremin, or even modern synthesizers. However, these are more recent developments. So that brings me to a question. We've all seen this instrument. Yes, it's a piano. What kind of instrument is this? Now, most people would say this is a stringed instrument because inside the piano, there are stretched strings. However, what's interesting is that the strings are not plucked or bowed, rather, they are beaten with a hammer, which is actually something that belongs to the category of idiophones or solid instruments. So a lot of organologists or people who study musical instruments are of the opinion that piano and other keyboard instruments should be in a category of their own. Now, we all have an instrument within ourselves, right? Nothing else but our voices. Now, some people use their instrument to produce beautiful music, like Luciano Pavarotti, the famous tenor. Other people use it to produce noise, but the fact remains that we all have a musical instrument within ourselves, our vocal cords. So what kind of instrument is the human voice? It has cords, right? Vocal cords. So it could be a stringed instrument, but there is also air that's powering this instrument. So is it an aerophone, a wind instrument? The answer is it's a combination of two categories. It is both a membranophone and an aerophone. The vocal cords are actually a pair of membranes. Think of the skin of a balloon, which vibrates due to air. And it is also an aerophone or a wind instrument because it is the creation of an air column between the lungs, the windpipe, and the facial cavities that causes the sound to resonate. Now, modern musicologists credit this classification to a pair of European musicologists called Hornbostel and Sachs, who lived in the early 20th century. However, Their work was actually based on earlier works by a Belgian organologist called Victor Charles Mahillon, who in turn adopted the system from guess where? From none other than Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra. Now, I know it's a standard practice of a lot of people, especially a lot of Indian politicians, to say everything good in this world originated in India with no historical basis. But in this case, it is very true, and it's a well documented fact that Mahillon's work was highly inspired and took from Bharata Muni's classification. Now, what is so fascinating about this is that the Natya Shastra was written somewhere between the 2nd century BC and the 2nd century AD. And many of the commonly used instruments today, such as the sitar or the tabla or anything else, they weren't even invented. So, Bharata had devised a theoretical classification for all instruments, past, present, and future. So, as per Bharata, musical instruments are classified as, according to the Sanskrit terminology, Tattavadya, which means chordophones, Sushira, aerophones, Avanadha, membranophones, and Ghana, idiophones, which, apart from electrophones, exactly corresponds to the modern classification. Now that we know the basics of how sound is produced and a little bit about how musical instruments are classified, let's look at some other questions. Now, you can't just have one sound for music. It needs to vary in pitch, loudness, and quality. At the Sound Garden of the Indian Music Experience Museum, you get to experience not just these variations in sound, but also its calming and meditative effects. So let's look at some commonly used musical terms or physics concepts. The first is resonance. Now, we've all heard this phrase, that resonates with me, or it was a resounding victory. The idea of resonance is when something is amplified or made louder. In music, resonance is what gives volume or body to the sound, and it occurs when objects vibrate at their natural frequency. For example, at the humming stone at the IME, when you place your head inside the hollow and hum at different pitches, at one particular pitch, the sound is amplified to a greater degree, which is at the resonant frequency of the air inside the hollow. Let's listen to a brief snippet. This really needs to be experienced rather than heard. The second physical concept is that of frequency. Frequency, in simple terms, is how fast or how slow an object vibrates. A faster vibration produces a higher frequency or a higher pitch, while a slower vibration produces a lower frequency. Consider these tubular bells. They demonstrate a principle that is common to all musical instruments. A longer pipe has greater mass and vibrates more slowly, causing a lower pitch, while a shorter pipe vibrates faster and hence has a higher pitch. Now notice how you can hear the 7 notes or the saptaswara in this instrument. The next concept is actually pronounced timbre, and in simple terms, timbre is what makes a piano sound different from, say, a violin or a flute, even if they all play the same note. It can also be called the tone of the instrument. Timbre is affected by the size and shape of the instrument, the material from which it's made, and the playing techniques that are used to make sound. For example, consider the sound table at the IME. It has four different sets of bars made of wood called xylophone. The brass and aluminium bars are called metallophones, and the stone set of bars is called lithophones. Let's listen to how each set sounds different from the other. Can stones sing? We have all heard about the famous stone pillars of Hampi that are said to produce the seven notes of Indian music when struck. Sadly, they cannot be played anymore due to their fragile nature. At the IME, we have a pair of singing stones which produce an ethereal sound when rubbed with moistened hands. This is similar to the wine glass singing that we may have seen. So, what happens is when you rub your moistened fingers and palms along the stones, our fingers stick to the stone as it encounters friction. The water on the palm, however, will allow our palm to slip as it forms a cushion to reduce friction. When the pressure is just right, this so-called stick slip motion will cause vibrations in the sides of the stone, which is then transmitted to the air in the slits between the stone, which causes sound at a particular frequency. This, I must say, is one of the most unique objects in the IME, and let's listen to a little bit of it being played. So, with that, I come to the end of my first part of this presentation, which I hope gave a little bit of insight into some of the science and the physics behind the wonderful world of musical instruments. So, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Kritika, who's going to tell us some interesting stories about how some musical instruments have evolved. Kritika, over to you.
Thank you, Mansi. Musical instruments are important representatives of a country's culture. While the musical instruments exist all over the world, India perhaps has one of the most diverse collections of instruments. From the north to the south, to the east to the west, every region has its own diversity, not just in its music, but also in its musical instruments. The instruments found in India range from the simplest, like the gogona, to the most complex, like the rudraveena. This brings us to the question: are musical instruments static indicators of a point in history of evolution, or do they continue to change and evolve over time? Yes, in fact, musical instruments have been evolving and changing throughout history, and the reason for this evolution are various factors like a pressing response to a problem faced by a musician. It could be due to a new technology that comes about, or discovery of a new material, due to political changes, or due to migration, or even due to the confluence of two musical cultures. Without diversity, creativity remains stagnant. The journey of a musical instrument over time is a story in itself. Let us take the example of three instruments, namely the violin, the tambura, and the mridanga, and trace how they evolved. Let's take the example of a Western instrument entering the world of Indian classical music. Yes, you guessed it right. None other than the violin, which was brought into our culture due to political changes and compulsions. Violin is a bowed instrument with four strings. There are two schools of thought regarding the existence of violin. One is that the Western musicologists opine that the first violin was introduced to the world in the early 16th century in Italy. Luthiers and collectors specifically give the fine historical instruments made by the Stradivari and Amati families from the 16th to the 18th century in Italy an exalted status. The other school of thought is that the origins of the violin may lie in a simple Indian string predecessor, the Ravanhatha, a folk instrument. Ravanhatha is a primitive, bowed, two-stringed instrument popular in the Kutch, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Sri Lanka, and surrounding areas. This instrument, in fact, traces its origins to the legend King Ravana, after whom it was supposedly named. Historians view between the 7th and the 10th centuries AD, India being a great hub for traders, saw the Arab traders exchanging spices, precious metals, taking musical instruments like Ravanhatha from India, which was one of the inspirations for the Europeans to create the modern violin. However, how it traveled is, of course, a matter of conjecture. The violin, in its present form, was introduced to Indian classical music from the West in the 19th century. The credit for introducing the violin to Carnatic music goes to Baluswami Dikshitar, brother of Carnatic composer Muthuswami Dikshitar. Baluswami Dikshitar heard the violin in the English band music at the colonial settlement of Fort St. George of Madras, and intrigued by that, he sought violin lessons from a European teacher and adapted it to Carnatic music. Another person who shares this credit is Vadivelu, the youngest of Tanjore quartet, who was attached to the court of Maharaja Sarfoji of Tanjore. Even though both the Indian and Western violins look similar, what sets them apart is not the instrument itself, but its tuning, playing position, and technique as well. The Western violin is played standing or seated on a chair, while the Carnatic violinists are seated cross-legged. Western violinists position the instrument between the jaw and the shoulder, while the Carnatic violinists balance it between the chest and the collarbone and the ankle bone on the right foot. The changes in technique and posture enable the musician to produce the gamaka or oscillations and all the microtones characteristic of Carnatic music. Let us see a video of Dr. L. Subramaniam demonstrating both the musical styles. violin merge into the Indian music scene so seamlessly? One of the reasons why the violin found early acceptance in both Hindustani and Carnatic classical traditions was the close resemblance to human voice and the ability to match the complex glides of classical vocal music. There have been attempts to innovate within the present day structure of the violin, one of the notable examples being the seven stringed violin of T. Chaudhaya. Chaudhaya lived in the pre microphone era, so in order for his violin to be heard, he attached three extra strings to make it a seven stringed instrument, which gave it the sound, depth, and the tone. Let us listen to a clip of Chaudhaya play one of his own compositions, Prasanna Parvati, in Raga Bilahari. So if you notice, you could actually see that or hear there were two octaves being played. So that was his speciality. So with this, let us trace the journey of a membranophone, Mridangam. Mridangam, a percussion instrument, is a two-sided drum predominantly played in South Indian Carnatic music. Mridangam has very ancient origins as depicted in iconography where Nandi is depicted playing a madalam, an instrument similar to Mridanga, to the Tandava dance of Lord Shiva. So it's not surprising to know that Indians are musical because all our Indian gods and goddesses are depicted playing one or the other musical instrument. Probably they must be having a big musical feast up in the heavens. So, as the word mridangam indicates, mrid means clay and ang meaning body, which shows that the early mridanga, which was made of hardened clay, over years has evolved to become an instrument made of different kinds of materials which increase its durability. The mridanga is generally made of wood in an angular barrel shape, having an outline like an elongated hexagon. It's interesting that cooked rice has found a place not only in the kitchen but also amidst musical instruments. Have you observed the black patch, circular patch at the center of the right face of the drum? That is called karane. Karane is a mix of manganese, iron ore, and cooked rice that is used to provide the chapu or the plang and other kinds of sounds. The tension of the instrument can be adjusted by loosening the strap to decrease the shruti or pitch and tightening the strap to increase the pitch. Technical innovation has made the instrument flexible as well. One example is of the nut and bolt mridanga, which gives the artist the flexibility to fine tune the instrument. The left and right heads of the instrument are usually connected in the case of wooden mridanga by leather straps. Here, when the left head is tuned, it also affects the right head and vice versa. However, with the nut and bolt mridanga, as you see, both the heads are not connected by any straps, which helps fine tune the heads separately. We usually see mridangis carrying a small bag with them, which they consider very precious. Have you ever wondered what's in that bag? The bag is their arsenal of weapons, which has their toolkit which is a stone, screwdriver, screw, spare, nut and bolt, etc. to tune their instrument. You might be wondering what's the place of talcum powder here? So talcum powder was not used only for that touch up before going on stage, but also it helps in the tuning process of the instrument. The world has progressed today, and we have the vegan movement, where people avoid using any animal byproducts. And this movement is not just confined to the world of fashion and cosmetics. Even musicians have the awareness and are opting for synthetic mridangams or vegan mridangams. Many instrument makers have adapted to the changes in the instrument making, and one person to be credited with making this on a large scale is Dr. K. Varadarangan. The synthetic rhythm Indian SRI Mridangam is made of synthetic drum heads mounted on fiberglass shells. The synthetic drum head completely avoids the use of animal skill, and the sturdy fiberglass shell avoids the need to cut any trees. This instrument is also being regularly used on concert platforms. Let us listen to a clip of Vidwan Jayachandra Rao using this instrument. So, thus, with the passage of time, the instrument has evolved for reasons of material availability from being made of mud, then wood, and today it's made of fiber. Evolution is seen in terms of melody, structure, weight, and the art by itself. Let's trace the evolution of this very popular drone instrument, the tambura. ತರವಲ್ಲ ತಗಿ ನಿನ್ನ ತಂಬೂರಿ ಸ್ವರ ಪರದೇ ಬಾರಿಸದಿರು tamburi. Shishnala Sharif, the saint poet of the 19th century, uses the tamburi to tell the masses to not just pluck the strings, but know how to play to the tune, understand the music, and the feeling behind it. The tambura is a plucked string instrument which provides the shruti or pitch for Indian classical music. As the sitar maestro Ravi Shankar exclaims, the tampura player is like a piano page turner who needs to know the music so intimately to know when to turn the page if the concert has to be a successful one. Similarly, we might think, what's a special skill needed to play a tambura? It's just strumming of strings. Ask a musician the importance of playing a tambura correctly, and you will get your answers in pages. That's how important a tambura artist is. Tambura has to be played at the right melodic rhythm and tone, and the strings are to be gently caressed to get the strumming sound right. A tambura artist need not be a performer, but he or she must be one with a very sharp and sensitive ear to identify even the slightest Shruti misalignment. Tambura playing is an art which can make or even break a concert. Did you ever imagine this? Like most of the instruments explained in this presentation, we are faced with different streams of thought regarding the tambura's evolution as well. The tambura is a very ancient instrument in the Indian context, which has references made in Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra. The word tanbu is also a Persian word and is the generic name for long necked string instruments from Central Asia. Now, whether the influence is only through the name similarity or whether the instrument itself was a cultural amalgamation has not fully been ascertained, but the possibility of cultural amalgamation is undeniable. Today's tambura is a long fretless lute with generally four drawn strings. There are two kinds of tamburas. One is the Carnatic version on the left, which is called tambura, and the other is the tanpura, the North Indian variant. The body of the Tanjavur tambura is made from a complete block of jackwood without a gourd and has a different kind of carving, while the Miraj tambura has a long, hollow, straight neck and a gourd and at the bottom with rich decoration. Yet another drone instrument that served as an alternative to this huge bulky instrument was the Shruti box or the Surpeti, which was popular in the early part of the 19th century. This works on the principles of a harmonium. The Shruti box is a hand bellow operated instrument which is similar to a harmonium in sound production, except that it does not have any keys. So, in the place of harmonium keys are the mechanical controls placed on the top or the sides of the instrument to control the pitch. Owing to the loud sound production, till today, the Shruti box is used with Nadaswaram Mela as a drone. The greatest challenge of carrying the huge, bulky tambura in trains and planes demanded innovations to the instrument. As Shubha Mudgal exclaims, when she walked on the railway platform carrying the tambura, onlookers would snigger and say, Dekho, Mirabai ja rahi hai. So, with the electronics revolution in the 80s, like any other instrument, tambura too evolved to become portable, like the electronic tambura, which is light and compact. This electronic instrument replicates the sound of a real tambura. With a press of a button, the drone is provided. Variants like the small tambura, the foldable tambura were designed to solve the issues of frequent damage to the instrument in terms of string and gourd replacements. Today, we don't even have a physical device. It's all available on an app in the mobile. For example, the iTanpura app. This uses stereo digital sound to simulate a set of two tanpuras, each of which can be tuned with a different string combination. It uses the sounds sampled from real tanpuras, which provide the realistic sound and that ambient environment. Being a musician myself, I can definitely say tambura has its own grandeur on the concert platform, which no electronic variant can substitute. To sum it up, instruments are so dynamic in nature, like softwares. They have this version 1.0, 2.0, etc., whose innovations know no boundaries at all. Hats off to all the instrument makers who have adapted to the changing scenario and produced these beautiful works of art in response to the demands of the society and time. Over to Dr. Sumar Sudhindra now, who will take us through her innovation and the journey of Veena, Karangini Veena.
Hello, good evening to everyone. Thank you, Kritika. As you all saw just now, Manasi and Kritika did a very good presentation, especially when I'm talking about innovations. Kritika just now mentioned a lot of things about musical instruments and how it has evolved over time. So, looking back at my own journey of about more than 40 years, I started traveling around the world in early 80s. Always carried the Saraswati Veena, which was bulky. It's not only bulky, it is also very fragile because the gourd has to be very thin. The Saraswati Veena's gourd is very thin. And every time, the first tour I did in 1982 in America, after the fourth concert, I was traveling to Albany and I reached Albany and I was going to Buffalo. I didn't open my box. The next day morning, I said, okay, let me take out my instrument and see in what condition it is. And I removed it. And to my shock, the gourd had broken into pieces because I had mishandled it in the transit. I had a tough time fixing up the gourd. Luckily, the top portion had not, no damage was done on the instrument, but I had a very, very tough time to fix the damaged veena, and I was able to do it. In fact, I have the photographs where I have put a lot of, adhesive tapes throughout my journey of the 33 concerts I did. I had really a very, very tough time to do that. Those days, I did not know how to repair the veena, but over a period of the next 10 years, I picked up everything. I knew every tour I did after 1982, I've invariably broken my veena. So every time this is a different story, and I will not go into all those details. But the thing is, I learned how to repair it, how to do, the little bit of melam, which is made out of wax, and to repair the bridge. I picked it up from the veena makers. I went and sat with them in their workshops and learned a lot. As much as I was playing the veena, I was also learning all these things because it became a very big necessity for me to learn all this. Otherwise, it would have been very, very difficult for me to do the performances. In the 90s, I took a dismantled Veena to England for one of the tours. It was all in a very small box, but I had to reassemble everything, which was a little cumbersome. Why would I say little? It was hugely cumbersome. And one bad experience I had on that tour was I was getting on the stage, and a volunteer, when I was entering, he came and hit the Veena, and my Veena came apart. And I had to request the audience to wait for me, and then I had to reset the whole thing. All these experiences set me thinking I should do something about the Veena. So in 1999, I had a first of its kind Veena seminar in Bangalore in collaboration with NIAS, where Dr. Rajaramana was heading at that time. And I had invited a lot of Veena players and Veena makers, everybody for the seminar. There was a lot of electronic Veenas by then. The work had started, and then there was one particular person, Mr. Lewis, who brought a Veena, electronic Veena, just a board and with two tumblers. And then he was not a Veena player, he was a guitar maker. So since I was standing there, he requested me, Madam, can you come and play? I had never seen that instrument. I went and sat and I played. I was able to play on that. It was very comfortable to play. I did play a composition, and that gave me a jump start in everything and started thinking, but I wanted to make that concert worthy. So I started doing a lot of experiments. By then I had done my PhD, and also I was playing with a lot of collaboration music with a lot of jazz players all around the world. Every time I went, they would use technology to their advantage. Here I was sitting with a Veena which was 250, 270 years old, and I was refusing to add on everything except for the contact mic and later the magnetic pickups. So I decided, okay, time has come for me to do some kind of an innovation. Then I started working, but it didn't work because I wanted a concert-worthy Veena, which was comfortable. And also for me, the tonal quality was a very important factor. As you heard the other two speakers speak, it's very important that every instrument has a distinct quality of sound and distinct timbre. That has to be maintained. So with the electronics, it's possible, but then I was not able to get through to that. In 2000, I went to Germany with a flautist, V.K. Raman, and we did a crazy amount of, in 12 days, we are doing 24 concerts, morning and evening. We were invited by the Indian government. We are playing at the Indian Pavilion. I took a dismantled Veena. Of course, I broke it. When I opened the suitcase, my gourd was again broken. By then, nothing was worrying me. So I knew how to go, buy the glues and fixed up the Veena. But the problem was I could not bring it to my apartment where we were staying. But the flautist was bringing it every day. And every night, he would come and tell me, Madam, can we play this composition? Can we play this Muktayam? And he was always ready with his flute, but my Veena stayed backstage in the auditorium. So that made me think, I said, no, I need to do something. Otherwise, I need to travel less. These were the only two options I had. I was not willing to travel less. And then with a lot of experiments, and I went full scale to do this Veena. And by 2001, my Veena was ready. It was concert worthy also. I did try several times. I took it to Chaudhaya. I was the secretary of Chaudhaya. So when it was free, I took it to the Chaudhaya and we did a lot of experiments there and we worked on it and saw how the sound would be fine for a concert. And then I was able to make the Tarangini Veena. I should share a funny story here. It's been two serious talks here. Once I was traveling in Atlanta, and every time I traveled, it was like always the Veena would be put in different boxes. Once it would be fiber box, once it would be plywood boxes, because not many Veena players used to travel those days. So one of the travels when I was going, the day I went to Chennai to pick up my box, unfortunately he had made it black. I had no time because I was catching a flight in the evening and I had to take that box and go. And the second concert was in Atlanta, and when I was checking out of Atlanta in the airport, everybody was giving me way. I was wondering what's happening. Everybody is looking at me sympathetically. Then I went to the counter and I realized everybody thought I was carrying a coffin. So that made me think there are many incidents like this in my life I can share. Those were so many different problems every time. And then in 2001, I was able to make this instrument. This instrument is very handy and it can be assembled in 2 minutes. And I know I don't need to do any more kind of veena making or repairing, as the role of a repairer is not there. If you ask me now, even to put a string, I get somebody to do it for me. In the 20 years journey of using the Tarangini Veena, life has become easier, and I can concentrate more on my performances, because for any performer, you need a instrument which is in kind of a very good condition, top condition. Otherwise, we won't be able to use it at all. So if you can see how I assembled the Veena in just 2 minutes, if you can see this video, I will just play. Yeah. Hi. Be careful about coronavirus. It's really spreading. Let's do our bit and be careful, and hopefully it won't spread in India and all of us will be safe. You've been asking me to show my Tarangini Veena, and you all wanted to know how it works. So here I am. After a long time, I've taken the time off to do this. Here is my Veena case. It's actually a guitar case where I keep my Veena and all the parts of the Veena also. So if you look at it, this is the main part of the Veena which I have, and then you turn it around, and here is this part. A good thing about this is all this goes into the guitar case, so you can put it in your guitar case and carry it. But for me, I find that it's little heavy when you put all this. All this together could be 5.5 kgs, but I don't want to carry that much weight. So what I do is I put all this in my suitcase. I carry the Veena portion because that's the most important thing, and this I nicely wrap up in bubble wrap and carry it in my suitcase. And this is the other part which I need to fix. This is very easy. Maybe it will take less than 2-3 minutes depending on how fast you are. I'm not very fast, so maybe I'll take a little more time. And then you fix it to this other side. Fix it tight so playing becomes easier. So if you look at it, I'm all set. I'll just play a short version of three ragas: Hamsanandi, Charukeshi, and Revati, and I'll play a very popular composition of Purandaradasa, uh, Yadavaniba in Raga Revati. It'll all be for about 5 minutes. I'll do this just for you to see how Tarangini Veena works. So as you see, instrument becomes part of your life. This is what the topic of the next talk my colleague will do. Before that, I would like to add two more things. I have a patent for this veena, and we have a lot more instruments which are similar and which are being done in newer innovations. It is all in display at IME Instrument Gallery, because this is a very modern museum. We also have many instruments which are all electronic, and 3-4 variations of the veena itself are all on display. This has become very convenient for the veena players to perform all over the world, and also for a lot of students to learn, because they all live in very small places. When they go abroad to study, all of them have carried these veenas, and they keep buying these veenas, and they learn, and they're able to store it in a small place. If they're living in a dorm or something, they're able to use the veena still. Over to Sahna now.
You too. Share. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Sumaji, thank you. And it was such a wonderful music there. Sometimes I dream about her when my mind have taken flight. And I'm lying down beside her in the stillness of night. The velvety stars above reflects upon her pearly face. I know we were meant to be together in this familiar place. If you just read these lines, you would think it's some intense love poetry. It is so, but it's about the love that the artist has for his piano. We have explored the science, the art, and innovation. Let us now have a look at the emotions or the human side and see how artists develop a deep bond with their instruments. And is there an impact on their music that they create with such relationships? We'll explore that. The deep connection between the musician and his instrument is a phenomenon which the world has seen for centuries. Musicians have personified the relationships with their instrument, given it names, felt the same way they feel towards a close friend or even a lover. When the performance touches the heights of instrumental brilliance, the performer and their instrument seem as one, as if there was no gap between the physicality of the player, the wood, the gut, the metal, or even electronics of the instrument. If you are an instrumentalist, you know what I'm talking about. You are in love with the instrument when you're spending most of the time of your time with the instrument. You feel so connected that the instrument is your extension. You buy an extra seat on the flight for your instrument, or you take selfies with your instrument, or you enjoy the time spent in taking care of your instrument. The artists who have made history are no exceptions. Be it Bharat Ratna Bismillah Khan, or Louis Armstrong, the American trumpeter, or Lang Lang, the Chinese pianist, or even the British pop icon, George Harrison. They've all forged a very intense and deep relationship with their instruments, where the two, the artist and the instrument, meld into one. Let us now talk about three such artists and their instruments, which is displayed in Indian music experience. Bismillah Khan, one of the greatest exponents of Shehnai, was mainly responsible for elevating the folk instrument played mostly in weddings or temples or even processions onto a concert stage. He was born to a family of Shehnai players in a small princely state called Dumron, which is located in today's Bihar. The year was 1916. At the age of 8, he moved to Benares, about 80 kilometers from his hometown, to apprentice under his maternal uncle, who was also a Shehnai player in that area. The two of them and their accomplices sat on the parapet adjoining the entrance to the Vishwanatha temple, finding a way to negotiate with society that was still divided along the lines of class, caste, religion. They sat there and played Shehnai for hours each day. Traditionally, Shehnai sat at the entrance of the temple and Havelis to greet a new day. The sound of Shehnai was considered auspicious. The humble folk instrument lacked aristocratic patronage and therefore undeserving of an artist's stature. But this stage was about to change. Bismillah played his Shehnai with great intricacy, refining its sound and softness. Such music had never been heard on an instrument before. Being an outdoor instrument, this with a powerful sound and a very distinct nasal quality, a Shehnai had to be held with great care so as to remain in tune with that finesse and the polish that an art needs. Apart from the technique of breath control, movement of tongue and lips and nimble fingers for swift tans and gamaks was mastered by this ustad. Devoted to his Shehnai, he lived and slept with it. He fondly referred to his Shehnai as his Begum, my wife. Bismillah made a number of alterations to his Shehnai. The reed that he used was from a grass grown on the banks of River Ganga. The instrument itself is very different from its original form, which originated in Persia or Iran. Although the name of Shehnai is of Persian origin, reed instruments have always been a very ancient history in India. Instruments that were structurally similar, like the Mukhavina or Nagaswaram, were traditionally used as Mangalavadyas or auspicious instruments in temples and ceremonies. When India got her independence in 1947, Bismillah was invited to perform at the Red Fort during the celebrations, symbolizing new beginnings. Bismillah, a staunch Muslim, is said to have his first creative calling at a Hindu temple on the banks of River Ganga. With this plurality in his beliefs, he became the ultimate symbol of secular India. Bismillah Shehnai found a new home at IME in a very moving ceremony in 2014. Zameen Hussain, Bismillah's grandson, emotional, with tears in his eyes, said, "Why wouldn't I cry? It was a treasure of my father for more than 8 decades. I feel as if my daughter is leaving me after marriage. Bidai jaisa lag raha hai." Let's listen to a short magical clip of Bismillah Khan now. With that beautiful, very pleasant music, we'll move on to the next artist and his instrument. If Indian music has to be represented on world stage, it's perhaps the sound of sitar that comes to one's mind. Sitar maestro Ravi Shankar not only introduced Indian music to the world, but he connected people of different cultures across the world. The stage is misty. The maestro, lit by his own smile and charm, says a prayer before he gently picks up what he considers Goddess Saraswati herself, his sitar. He always said music is his religion and his quickest way to reach godliness. The relationship between Ravi Shankar and his sitar was that of a god and a devotee. Ravi Shankar's performance at the Monterey International Pop Festival marked the high point in the popularity of Indian classical music in the West. Although he admired the artistry and the musicianship of some of his fellow performers, he was appalled to see Jimi Hendrix burn his guitar and refuse to take stage. His set was later rescheduled to next day, and such was his devotion or sentiment to his instrument. Let's see a small clip of his concert at the Woodstock concert here. That was Ravi Shankar in the Woodstock concert. A pioneering ambassador of Indian classical music, Ravi Shankar achieved critical and popular acclaim both in India and abroad. In the 60s, he rose to global prominence through his association with George Harrison of the pop band The Beatles. He recorded more than 60 albums, collaborated widely with other legendary musicians, and won 5 Grammy Awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award. He's the one of only 6 musicians to be awarded the Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian award. Ravi Shankar's instrument, the sitar, is a long-necked string instrument, which is played by plucking its sitars. The video you see is displayed at IME now. The origin of sitar has been a subject of conjecture through ages. There is a common story attributing the invention of sitar to Amir Khusro, a 13th century poet who contributed to the early development of Hindustani Rag Sangeet. But it has no basis in historical fact. There are other beliefs that sitar was derived from ancient Indian instruments such as the Rudra Veena and the Saraswati Veena and so on. Sangeet Sudarshana states that sitar was developed from a Persian instrument called sehtar by a fakir known to be the son-in-law of Tansin, who was also called Amir Khusro. This is around the 18th century. The sitar continued to evolve over the last century and continues to evolve today. The picture you see is of the Persian sitar. Modern sitars can be classified into 2 categories according to their structure, design, and setup. Each used to play a different style of music. The Maihar style, which is popularized by Ravi Shankar, is also called Karaj Pancham. The other style of sitar was Imdad Khani style sitar, popularized by Vilayat Khan, and it's also called Gandhar Pancham. The difference between the two is the number of strings, type of strings, and importantly, tuning of the strings. Now, coming to the style of playing, although Ravi Shankar is known for his mastery in sitar, he was initially trained on the surbahar. You can see a small clip of the surbahar here. And he was trained by his guru Baba Alauddin Khan. He later transitioned to sitar. Surbahar is a bass sitar, but with an older, slower repertoire of deep bends and mean. Played slower at lower octaves, it is suited for a slow elaboration of drupal. The instrument is very large, heavy, and is notoriously difficult to play. Coming from this background, Ravi Shankar often explored lower octaves during his alap, even on the sitar. The bass strings include, which is very unique to Ravi Shankar's style, helped him to bring some aesthetics of surbahar unique to Ravi Shankar's style, and he elaborated in the lower octaves into the sitar playing while building on the sitar's ability to play fast and virtuosic phrases. The surbahar had gained popularity in the 19th century, but in the 20th century, we saw it struggle to find a place in the dominant khayal style. Let's hear a short audio clip which shows how Ravi Shankar adapted surbahar playing style into the sitar playing. Observe the lower octaves that he plays in. So instruments have always evolved over the years according to the need of the hour. People have innovated for amplification of sound, expanding the range of notes, mobility, and very importantly, ease of use. As Ravi Shankar got closer to 90 years of age, his frail frame could no longer take the weight of his sitar. But he had a lot of music in him. So he innovated his sitar yet again and made it lighter. He had removed the tumba on the top. we have a small clip of his last concert. This was incidentally Yeah, that was Ravi Shankar and his daughter, Anushka Shankar, in his last concert, which was incidentally held in our own city, Bangalore. As we come to the end of the story of Ravi Shankar here, we start with another legendary musician, M.S. Subbulakshmi. As philosopher and father of Carnatic music, Purandaradasa of 15th century Karnataka puts it, people who play the tambura cross the ocean of earthly life, and one who maintains the rhythm joins the devas. True to the song, in no other voice in the 20th century India was devotion more pronounced than it was in the voice of Subbulakshmi, one of the greatest musicians the world has seen. Her music turned her fans into devotees. Mahatma Gandhi was one of them. Knowing that she might not be able to sing a song, he requested, Gandhi is supposed to have said, I would rather hear her recite the lines than hear someone else sing it. Let's listen to a short clip of the song which was requested by Mahatma Gandhi, Hari Tumharo.
हरे तुम हो जन के भीर द्रौपदी की लाज राखी तुम बढ़ायो चीर द्रौपदी की लाज राखी तुम बढ़ायो चीर हरि तुम्हारो जन के भीर भक्त कारण रूप नर हरि धरियो आप.
Okay, for lack of time, we'll have to stop it there. But apart from the Bhakti Bhava, she was known for her passion for using her tambura. So much so that it became a part of her persona. Tambura is a drone instrument that provides the pitch. That's the foundation on which one sings. It can provide a beautiful canvas to paint the artist's creativity and expression. The young Subbulakshmi, or Kunja as she was called, was apparently fascinated by tuning of the tambura. She would play the tambura, stop it, and then sing for some time, and then again go back and play and check if she had maintained the pitch. Kunja would hold the tambura close to her ears, listen to it intently, and then she would reluctantly place the tambura back on the mat, touch it with the tambura with her little fingers and press her eyes gently with it, gesturing a gratitude to her tambura. These instruments become so close to the artist that it can become difficult to see it as an object, and often it's personified and given names. Lakshmi, Saraswati, Mitra, Kamakshi, Katyayani. You would be wrong if you thought these were the names of some women. These are the names of tamburis of some famous artists. Subbalakshmi's tamburas Lakshmi and Saraswati were personally named and given to her by her guru and legendary Carnatic vocalist Semangudi Srinivas Iyer in the 1940s. And these tamburas traveled the world to prestigious events and venues. IME holds one of her treasures, a beautifully crafted Tanjavur tambura. This was the same tambura that was taken by Subbalakshmi to her first overseas tambura trip to the International Music Conference at Edinburgh in 1963. There is a beautiful clip from the Films Division documentary that I would like to present.
नमः प्रणवार्थाय शुद्धज्ञानैकमूर्ते निर्मलाय प्रशान्ताय दक्षिणामूर्ते नमः
The priceless gift of music, moving and soothing in its immortality.
Yeah. These are just a few examples of a fascinating and a symbiotic relationship between artists and their instruments. Whether one is a budding musician struggling to make a mark or is an established artist, this is a common story. The bond between the instrument and the artist is perhaps the difference between success and failure. With this, I come to an end of my presentation. I hope all of you enjoyed it. And if any one of you have questions to any of us, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Sahana. And we've been inundated with a lot of questions. And during the presentation, I've tried my best to answer as many as I could in the chat box. So I'm just only going to take 1 or 2 questions here, and the rest I would request, if you really want to know the answer and it's not been answered in the chat box, please write to us at info@indianmusicexperience.org with your question. Kritika, if you could just type the email ID in the chat box and make it to all attendees and panelists so that you all have the email ID. Please feel free to write your questions to us. So I'm just going to take a couple of questions. I'm just scrolling through them, and I'll direct them to Dr. Suma, who's here because, you know, she's an expert, of course, in instruments. So quick question. What material is used in the Tarangini Veena? If that could just be an objective type answer so that I can go on to the next question.
A Nandi wood is used. It's a very common wood which is available in and around Bangalore. I've used a very common wood for that.
Perfect. Next question is a little more philosophical, which is, do you think all instruments will become sort of virtual and electronic one day, or will physical original instruments still have a place?
I hope it won't. I would love to play on Saraswati Veena still. But then there are constraints. If we don't adopt to the new technology, we will be the one who will be left behind. I think it's very important to be prudent with what you do and adopt what is feasible, what is good for you. That's how Veena came to this stage, our tambura came to this stage, our violin came to this stage. If we don't innovate, the instruments won't take the next step forward. It's the music ultimately what you play, what is in your heart, what is in your mind, what have you practiced, what have you, done, going to get it out of sadhana. That is what is going to come out of instrument. Instrument is, after all, an instrument to put your musical thoughts. But innovations are required. But I hope all our beautiful instruments still stay and play a very important role.
Dr. Suma, there's another question for you. Of course, this was from Mr. Giridhar Murthy, whom we know very well. Is the scale of your Tarangini Veena less than the span of a normal Veena?
No, there is no change from Tarangini Veena. I can switch from Tarangini Veena to Saraswati Veena in the same concert. And so can the students do that. They can play on Saraswati Veena and shift over to Tarangini Veena. There is no change of scale or frets. There are still 24 frets. The fretboard, the length of the fret from fretboard to the bridge remains the same. It's standard and it has remained the same.
There are several more questions on musical instruments. Again, maybe you can keep them brief so that we can get through more of them, since you have so many questions about the Veena and musical instruments. The next one is from Mr. Siddharth Kumar, asks how to choose a musical instrument in terms of quality or brand. What are those things that you look for?
If you're not traveling, if you're just learning the Veena or any other instrument, try and pick up somebody who has an instrument. That makes your life much easier, because it would be seasoned by then. It would work very well for you. If you see, for a professional use, you need to consult somebody. Generally, when you go to the teachers, they'll be able to guide you through to buy good instruments. There are a lot of good instrument making shops which are available, which are around the country in South India. There's no problem. You can pick up the instrument. But if you are learning Veena in particular, and if you want an instrument, go to one of your uncles or aunts or somebody who has a Veena, pick it up, get it repaired, and start learning.
Super, perfect. There's another question, and I'm going to go on till 8 o'clock. We have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to go on and then stop at 8.
We can go for 5 more minutes, Hansi.
Great. This is like a rapid fire that I'm doing. Yeah. Are there any Indian instruments that are completely bass or baritone? So as far as I know, we'll keep this like a conversation. Even something like the Surbahar is not completely bass. Yes, it is dominant in the lower octaves, or even Rudraveena, for that matter, has a certain range. And my view on this is that because a lot of Indian music is inspired by vocal music, which in general has a range of frequencies that we present at. So my understanding is that there may not be Indian instruments that are completely baritone or bass, but I will ask Dr. Suma what your view on this is.
It's very true, because Indian instruments have always followed the vocal tradition, both in Carnatic and in Hindustani music. In fact, there used to be a school of thought as late as late 20th century, that they would not even venture into playing the 2.5 octaves a normal voice would have. So they were, though the instrument allows you to use the lower octave easily, they were not using it. And also, it's in South Indian music in particular, because it's composition oriented, the compositions are all within 1.5 to 2 octaves. So basically, there is no instrument which plays only the bass. No, we don't have it.
Right. And I just wanted to sort of qualify what we said about the Gayaki predominance. Of course, in Hindustani music, as we all know, instrumental music has taken on a life of its own, where there are instrument-specific compositions. In Carnatic music, this is still a very niche movement, where you have instrument-specific compositions. They're coming up, but it's very...
If I can add on to that, though there is instrumental music, but there's no instrumental music which is composed only for the lower octaves. The question was about that. No, there is nothing like that. No instrument, no Indian instrument specifically plays only the lower octave. No.
Okay. So there was a question from Sunil, who says, mostly recordings of Indian classical music are poor in quality. And reproducing the depth and detail of these instruments is a problem which reduces the ability to enjoy it at home. How can IME help to address this? I partly agree with you that in general, old recordings, definitely recording technology has improved over time. So recordings from the early 1900s or even mid 20th century would not be that great in quality or stereophonic sound. At the IME, we have a huge selection of curated recordings as part of our exhibits. And what we've done to the extent possible is to sort of clean up these recordings and try to remove some of the extraneous disturbance that might be part of the recordings without compromising sort of the analog quality of the recordings. We don't want them to sound all clean and digital. We want them to retain the original quality, yet clean up some of the disturbance, which we've done for the recordings that are part of the permanent exhibits. Having said that, recordings these days have improved a lot, and instrument recordings from the later part of the 20th century or the early 21st century are certainly of a very high quality, and you'll only have to search on YouTube for high quality recordings to find very good ones. And of course, nothing matches to the best experience, which is listening to a concert live. So once live concerts open up, please do attend them. And I think I'm going to stop with that because we just have 2 minutes left. And it's always good to stop before the bell rings. So before
we conclude, yeah, I'll just to add on, if you listen to 1970s recording and all that, it's beautiful. Though the facilities we have today, they didn't have it at that time, but it's beautiful. For example, my own guru's, he did record-breaking concerts with beautiful Panchaveena concerts and all that, which was recorded live at that time. It's almost like a live concert. They would record it because there was no facility to do back and forth like the way we do it right now. There are very good quality, recordings which you can listen to, and a lot of them have been also cleaned up by various agencies, and then a lot is available on YouTube. You can listen to all that. And before Mansi says, thank you, BIC, for doing this, and especially Mr. Ravichandran, we are very happy to do this. And to all of you who are viewing it, come back and visit IME. That's very important for all of us.
So thank you once again to BIC, and thank you all for being such an enthusiastic audience. We're so happy to have presented this. And with that, please visit IME. All details on our website, indianmusicexperience.org. I've put a lot of links and other information in the chat box, so please do take the time to go through it. Thank you. Over to you, Raghu.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Suma, Mansi, Sahana, and Kritika. This was absolutely fantastic. The spectrum of musical knowledge that the Indian Music Experience team has presented, only just scraping the surface. I imagine it has left us all enthralled. To immerse yourself in everything music, don't forget to visit the IME online or in person. I'm sure the curatorial team would be happy to answer all your questions and tell more fascinating stories. Thank you, audiences, for joining us today, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.